It was a Christmas Eve like no other, a young boy's innocent prayer for a miracle, a struggling mother's tears of despair, and a mysterious knock at the door that would change everything. What they found outside wasn't just gifts. It was the answer to a dream they thought no one heard. But when the truth behind the gesture is revealed, it's not just their Christmas that transforms. It's their hearts. This is a story you won't forget. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. The room was shrouded in shadows, save for the faint, flickering glow of a small, bare Christmas tree. Its dim lights barely illuminated the tired, tear-streaked face of a young boy, Jamie, sitting silently by the window. His knees were drawn up to his chest, his small frame shivering, not from cold, but from the weight of disappointment. Outside, the muffled sounds of distant holiday laughter only deepened the silence in the house. Jamie's stomach growled softly, a cruel reminder of the emptiness that had become all too familiar. Behind him, his mother, Clara, sat slumped in a worn chair. Her head was buried in her hands, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. The stack of unopened bills on the kitchen table was the only thing that seemed to grow in their house. Christmas, once a season of joy, had become a stark reminder of all they had lost. Clara had tried to explain to Jamie why this year would be different, why Santa might not come, but how do you explain poverty to a heart full of hope? Then, out of the silence, the doorbell rang. Jamie's head shot up, his wide eyes sparkling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He glanced back at his mother, who was too drained to move, before darting to the door. With trembling hands, he opened it to find a brightly wrapped package sitting on the porch, glowing under the faint light of the street lamp. Handled stiffly, he heard my prayer. Clara staggered to her feet, disbelief etched across her wary face. As she reached Jamie's side, her heart raced with a mixture of awe and confusion. The mysterious package seemed to promise something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The biting December wind howled through the run-down neighborhood, carrying the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys. Snow blanketed the uneven sidewalks, muffling the crunch of the occasional passerby's footsteps. The streetlights flickered sporadically, casting long, uneven shadows over the worn homes that lined the street. In one of these homes, Lisa Moore sat hunched over a creaky kitchen chair, her face illuminated by the dim glow of a single light bulb hanging overhead. Her thin hands clutched a pile of bills, each stamped with red notices that screamed "past due." Lisa, once brimming with confidence, now bore the weight of years of hardship. She had tried to hide her struggles from her 13-year-old son Ethan, but the cracks in their lives were too wide to cover anymore. The small house felt colder than usual, not just because of the broken heater, but because of the suffocating hopelessness that filled the air. In the corner of the living room, Ethan sat cross-legged by a skeletal Christmas tree. The decorations were sparse, a few tattered ornaments from thrift stores, and a string of dim lights that barely flickered. He stared at the tree, his wide brown eyes reflecting both the faint glow and the sadness he carried inside. "Mom," Ethan said softly, his voice cutting through the heavy silence, "why doesn't Santa ever come to us?" Lisa's heart clenched. She opened her mouth to answer, but found herself unable to muster anything beyond a weak, Santa's busy, sweetheart." Her voice cracked, and she quickly turned away to hide her tears. She wanted to tell him the truth, but how could she explain the crushing reality of the situation? How could she tell him that this Christmas, like so many others, would pass without joy? Ethan didn't press further. He simply looked back at the empty space beneath the tree and let out a quiet sigh. After a few moments, he stood and shuffled to the small bedroom they shared. Lisa sat motionless, staring at the tree, as tears blurred her vision. Next door, Marcus Johnson stood at his kitchen counter, absent-mindedly stirring a mug of hot cocoa. In his early 40s, Marcus was known around the neighborhood for his kind-hearted nature. He was the type of man who mowed the lawns of elderly neighbors without being asked, and left groceries on doorsteps when he knew someone was struggling. But his quiet generosity was often overshadowed by the assumptions people made about him, especially Lisa Moore. Lisa's dismissive glances and curt remarks had never gone unnoticed by Marcus. Her veiled prejudice toward him, rooted in his race and quiet demeanor, had always stung. Yet, Marcus had never let it deter him. He understood that people like Lisa often carried more pain than they let on, and he chose compassion over confrontation. As Marcus took a sip of his cocoa, he heard the faint sound of Ethan's voice through the thin walls of their homes. Curious, he set down his mug and moved closer to the window. The soft sound of Ethan's prayer drifted through the cold night air, carried by the stillness. "Dear Jesus," Ethan's voice trembled. "I know I'm not supposed to ask for much, but I just want one thing. Please, please let us have a Christmas like the other kids. I don't want Mom to be sad anymore. I just want us to be happy." Marcus's heart ached at the raw sincerity in Ethan's voice. He could hear the boy sniffle, his quiet sobs muffled through the walls. Marcus leaned against the window frame, his mind racing. He had seen the state of their home, heard Lisa's struggles, and now, hearing Ethan's innocent prayer, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. The next day, Marcus made his way to the town's small shopping district. The streets were alive with the sights and sounds of the holiday season. Brightly lit decorations hung from every lamppost, and cheerful music spilled out of storefronts. Marcus moved with purpose, his list growing in his mind. A Christmas tree, lights, toys, food. Everything he could think of to give Ethan the Christmas he so desperately wanted. As Marcus picked out toys, a small race car set, a stuffed bear, and a building block set, he couldn't help but smile, imagining the joy on Ethan's face. At the grocery store, he filled his cart with all the essentials for a proper Christmas dinner: a ham, potatoes, green beans, and even a pie. Finally, he stopped at a store that sold decorations, selecting strings of lights and ornaments that would make their trees shine. He loaded everything into his car, careful to keep it all hidden from view as he pulled up to Lisa's house later that evening. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the soft crunch of snow beneath his boots. Marcus worked quickly, setting up the tree on their porch and placing the gifts and groceries carefully at the door. He strung the lights neatly, ensuring they would sparkle when plugged in. Finally, he added a handwritten note to the top of the stack. "Merry Christmas. Remember you are loved. From a friend." Taking a step back, Marcus admired his work. The porch looked magical, glowing softly under the faint light of the street lamp. He smiled to himself, imagining Ethan's reaction. With one final glance, He pressed the doorbell and quickly retreated into the shadows, disappearing before anyone could see him. Inside, Lisa and Ethan were finishing a meager dinner of canned soup and crackers. The sound of the doorbell startled them both. Lisa glanced at Ethan, who jumped up eagerly, his curiosity sparking for the first time in days. "Who could that be?" Lisa muttered, more to herself than to Ethan. Ethan pulled open the door, and his mouth fell open in disbelief. His eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. The tree, the lights, the gifts, and the food. For a moment he was speechless. Then his face broke into a wide grin, and he called out, "Mom! Mom! Come back!" Lisa rushed to the door, her eyes immediately welling with tears as she saw the miraculous scene on their porch. She couldn't believe it. Who would do something like this? As she picked up the note and read the words, her heart ached with a mix of gratitude and guilt. "It's a miracle," Ethan said, his voice full of wonder. He held one of the packages close to his chest. "Jesus heard my prayer, Mom. He sent someone to help us." Lisa knelt beside him, pulling him into a tight embrace. She didn't have the heart to tell him otherwise. Instead, she whispered, "Yes, baby, it's a miracle." But deep down, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that someone close by had orchestrated this act of kindness. And as the days passed, she began to piece the puzzle together. A few days later, while chatting with a neighbor, Lisa learned the truth. "It was Marcus," the neighbor said matter-of-factly. "I saw him bringing everything over that night." Lisa's heart sank. Marcus? The man she had dismissed and insulted countless times? The man whose kindness she had overlooked? She felt a wave of shame crash over her. How could she have been so blind? That evening, Lisa stood nervously at Marcus's door, clutching the small plate of cookies she and Ethan had baked together. When Marcus opened the door, his face lit up with a kind smile. "Lisa," he said warmly, "what a surprise." Lisa's voice trembled as she spoke. "Marcus, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for giving my son a Christmas he'll never forget. I was wrong about you, about so much, and I'm sorry." Marcus held her gaze for a moment before nodding gently. "It's okay, Lisa. What matters is that you and Ethan had a good Christmas. That's all I wanted." Tears filled Lisa's eyes as she handed him the cookies. "You didn't just give us a Christmas, Marcus. You gave us hope. And you reminded me what kindness really looks like." "It's an honor to be of help, mister," she said curtly, and felt the return to her world pull her up. As Lisa walked back to her house, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Marcus's act of compassion had done more than brighten their holiday. It had changed the way she saw the world. And for the first time in a long time, Lisa truly believed in the magic of Christmas. The wind outside howled against the worn windows of Lisa's small home, a chilling reminder of the bitter cold that mirrored the struggles within. Lisa sat at the rickety kitchen table, her hands cradling her face as she stared at the stack of bills and empty wallet before her. Christmas Eve loomed over her like a dark cloud, and the weight of her inability to provide for Ethan felt suffocating. Ethan sat quietly nearby, fiddling with a small broken toy car that had long since lost its wheels. Despite their circumstances, his faith remained steadfast. "Don't worry, Mom," he said softly, his voice breaking the oppressive silence. "Jesus will find a way. He always does." Lisa sighed heavily, her bitterness spilling over. "Ethan, life doesn't work like that. Prayers don't magically put presents under the tree or food on the table." Her voice was sharper than she intended, and she immediately regretted it when she saw the hurt in his eyes. Ethan turned away, his small shoulders slumping as he gazed at their bare, undecorated Christmas tree. The sight of her son's sadness broke something in Lisa, but instead of softening, her frustration grew. She needed someone to blame, and her mind immediately turned to Marcus. "Always playing the good guy," she muttered under her breath, thinking of her neighbor. She often ridiculed his quiet generosity, seeing it as a way to show off or gain attention. "If he's so perfect, why doesn't he help us?" she thought bitterly. Next door, Marcus sat in his modest living room, sipping a cup of tea as the soft glow of his Christmas tree filled the space. He couldn't shake the sound of Ethan's prayer from his mind. The boy's unwavering faith, even in the face of hardship, had deeply moved him. Marcus had always believed in helping others, but this time felt different. It felt personal. He glanced at the small envelope of cash he had set aside for himself. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to make a difference for Ethan and Lisa. He began jotting down a list, determined to give them the Christmas they deserved. Decorations, toys, groceries. He mentally ticked off each item, picturing Ethan's face lighting up with joy. The next morning, Marcus set out early, bundled against the cold as he made his way to the town's shops. He carefully selected each item, imagining how they would transform the small, gloomy house next door. A brightly lit star for the tree, colorful ornaments, and strings of sparkling light. A remote-controlled car, a set of puzzles, and a plush bear. At the grocery store, he filled his cart with the makings of a hearty Christmas meal: a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and even a small box of cookies. Returning home, Marcus got to work wrapping the gifts and organizing everything into neat packages. He tied each one with festive ribbons and added a handwritten note to the largest box. "Merry Christmas. You are loved. From a friend." As night fell, Marcus waited patiently for the lights in Lisa's house to dim. He wanted to ensure they wouldn't see him, hoping his gesture would feel like a miracle rather than charity. When the time was right, he quietly carried the packages to their porch. The snow crunched softly under his boots as he worked quickly, setting up the tree, arranging the presents, and placing the food at the doorstep. He took a step back, admiring the transformation. The once bare porch now glowed warmly under the soft light of the decorations. Marcus smiled to himself, imagining Ethan's reaction. With a deep breath, he rang the doorbell and slipped back into the shadows, his heart pounding with both excitement and nervousness. Inside, Lisa and Ethan were sitting in silence. The house felt colder than ever, the weight of the holiday season pressing down on them. The sudden chime of the doorbell startled them both. "Who could that be?" Lisa muttered, rising from her chair. Ethan was faster, dashing to the door and pulling it open. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. His eyes widened in disbelief as he took in the sight of the sparkling tree, the beautifully wrapped presents, and the neatly arranged boxes of food. His jaw dropped, and for a moment he could only stare. "Mom! Mom, come look!" he finally called, his voice filled with a mix of awe and excitement. Lisa hurried to the door, her breath catching as she saw the scene before her. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Who could have done this? Her eyes fell on the note attached to the largest box. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. "Merry Christmas. You are loved. From a friend." Ethan turned to her, his face glowing with joy. "Mom, it's Jesus. He heard my prayer." Lisa felt a lump in her throat as she watched Ethan tear into one of the presents, his laughter filling the cold, quiet house. For a moment, she wanted to believe him, but her pride wouldn't let her fully embrace the moment. Deep down, she knew someone had gone out of their way to help them, and while she was grateful, the thought stung. She hated feeling like a charity case, even if the gesture was wrapped in kindness. Still, as she watched Ethan play with his new toys and admire the glowing tree, a small part of her heart softened. For the first time in weeks, their home felt warm again, filled with the spirit of the season. "It's true, Barta," she said after the two kids finally dropped off to sleep. Marcus watched from a distance, hidden in the shadows of his porch. He couldn't hear their voices, but he saw the way Ethan's face lit up as he discovered the gifts. He saw Lisa step back, her hand covering her mouth as if holding back tears, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. His actions had made a difference, even if they never knew it was him. As he turned to go inside, he whispered to himself, "Merry Christmas, Ethan." The joy in Ethan's face was unlike anything Lisa had seen in months. He tore into the packages with a gleeful abandon that made the room feel alive again. Wrapping paper flew in every direction as he unearthed a remote-controlled car, a soft plush bear, a box of puzzles, and a shining ornament that he immediately hung on their tree. "Mom, look at this," he exclaimed, holding up the ornament. "It's beautiful. I told you Jesus heard my prayer." Lisa managed a weak smile as she sat on the worn sofa, watching Ethan's excitement spill over. Her son's laughter filled the once quiet house, and for the first time in ages, it felt like Christmas. Yet, beneath the warmth of the moment, a gnawing question lingered. Who had done this? As Ethan explored his newfound treasures, he came across the box of food. His face lit up even brighter when he saw the roast chicken, potatoes, cranberry sauce, and cookies. "Mom, we can have a real Christmas dinner," he said, running over to hug her. "We're not forgotten, I told you." Lisa wrapped her arms around him, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. She didn't want to admit it, but whoever had done this had saved their Christmas. The thought stung, her pride still battling the gratitude bubbling up inside her. She looked at the handwritten note again. "Merry Christmas. You are loved. From a friend." From his window next door, Marcus watched the scene unfold. He saw Ethan's laughter, the way he clutched the bear close to his chest, and the way Lisa held her son a little tighter. A soft smile played on Marcus's lips as he took a sip of his tea. This wasn't about thanks or recognition. It was about restoring a little bit of hope and joy to a family that had been through so much. For Marcus, this was what Christmas was about. Quiet acts of kindness, the kind that left an impact without demanding anything in return. He turned away from the window, satisfied that he had done what was needed. The warmth in his chest was enough. The next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving the neighborhood draped in a serene white blanket. Lisa was tidying up when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find Mrs. Carter, her elderly neighbor, bundled up in a thick coat and scarf. "Merry Christmas, Lisa," Mrs. Carter said warmly, handing her a small plate of cookies. "How are you and Ethan doing?" Lisa gestured to the gifts and the decorated tree. "Better now," she admitted, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "Someone left all this for us last night. I don't know who, but it's..." She trailed off, unsure of how to express her gratitude without feeling exposed. Mrs. Carter smiled knowingly. "I think I might know who it was," she said, leaning in slightly. "I saw Marcus Johnston sneaking around with those packages late last night. He was trying to be discreet, but I recognized him." Lisa froze, her cheeks flushing with a mix of embarrassment and shock. "Marcus?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Carter nodded. "He's a good man, Lisa. Always helping where he can. You're lucky to have a neighbor like him." As Mrs. Carter walked away, Lisa closed the door slowly, her mind racing. The man she had ridiculed and dismissed, the man whose generosity she had mocked, had been the one to save their Christmas. Shame washed over her, followed closely by a deep sense of gratitude. She sat down, staring at the gifts, and thought back to every time she had been unkind to Marcus. Ethan walked in, clutching his new bear. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, noticing the faraway look on her face. Lisa shook her head, pulling him close. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking." She knew she had to do something. She couldn't let this act of kindness go unacknowledged, not after everything. For the first time in years, Lisa felt a crack in the armor she had built around herself. It wasn't easy, but she decided she would thank Marcus and apologize for how she had treated him. Later that afternoon, Lisa dressed warmly and walked next door with Ethan by her side. She clutched a small plate of cookies, a gesture that felt insignificant compared to what Marcus had done for them. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door, unsure of what to say or how he would react. When the door opened, Marcus greeted them with a warm smile. "Lisa, Ethan," he said, his tone welcoming. "Merry Christmas." Lisa hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "Marcus, Her voice faltered as she tried to find the right words. "I just found out it was you who left the gifts. I don't even know how to thank you. You didn't have to do that, especially after the way I've treated you." Marcus waved her words away with a gentle chuckle. "Lisa, you don't need to thank me. It wasn't about you or the past. It was about Ethan, and about making sure he had a Christmas to remember." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes as she handed him the plate of cookies. "Still, I'm sorry for how I've acted. I was wrong about you." Marcus smiled, his kind eyes meeting hers. "We all have our moments," he said. "What matters is what we do moving forward." Ethan, who had been standing quietly by Lisa's side, suddenly stepped forward and hugged Marcus tightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice muffled against Marcus's coat. "You're like Santa." Marcus laughed softly, patting Ethan on the back. "I think Santa's got a better beard than me," he joked, making Ethan smile. As they walked back home, Lisa felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of Christmas. Not just the gifts or the decorations, but the power of kindness, forgiveness, and community. Marcus hadn't just given them a magical Christmas. He had given her a second chance to see the world differently, and for that she would always be grateful. Lisa stood on the porch of Marcus's house the next day, clutching Ethan's hand. The brisk winter air nipped at her cheeks, but it wasn't the cold that made her hesitate. It was the weight of everything she needed to say. The world felt quieter, as if waiting for her to make the first move. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes full of curiosity and warmth. "Are you scared, Mom?" he asked, squeezing her hand. Lisa managed a faint smile. "Not scared, sweetheart. Just thinking." Finally, she knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately, and there stood Marcus, his familiar, calm expression welcoming them in. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, his demeanor as steady as ever. On seeing them, "Lisa, Ethan," Marcus greeted them warmly. "What brings you by?" Lisa swallowed hard, her words catching in her throat. She glanced down at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Marcus. "I know it was you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You're the one who left the gifts. I don't even know where to begin. Thank you. Truly, and I'm sorry." Marcus tilted his head, his expression kind but unassuming. "There's no need to apologize, Lisa. And no need to thank me either. It wasn't about me. It was about Ethan. Every kid deserves to feel the magic of Christmas." Lisa's breath hitched at his humility. Marcus's gentle smile didn't waver. "We all have things we need to learn," he said. "I'm just glad I could help." That night, as Lisa sat on the couch with Ethan, her thoughts lingered on Marcus's words. She had spent so much time building walls, against others, against herself, that she hadn't realized how much they had isolated her. Marcus's quiet kindness had dismantled those walls in a way she hadn't thought possible. Over the next few weeks, Lisa began to see Marcus not as the symbol she had unfairly judged, but as the person he truly was. She noticed how he greeted everyone in the neighborhood with a kind word, how he always seemed to lend a hand when someone needed it, how he moved through life with a grace that demanded no recognition. For the first time, Lisa saw not just Marcus, but the impact of his actions. She decided to share her story. At the local community center, Lisa stood in front of a small group of neighbors. "I need to admit something," she began, her voice steady but vulnerable. "For years I let my own assumptions and bitterness cloud the way I saw people. I judged Marcus without ever knowing him. But this Christmas, he showed me what true kindness looks like. He didn't just help my family, he changed how I see the world." The room was quiet as Lisa spoke, her words resonating with those who had known Marcus for years. Her honesty sparked conversations, encouraging others to confront their own biases and recognize the power of simple acts of kindness. On New Year's Eve, Lisa invited Marcus over for dinner. She prepared a modest but heartfelt meal, determined to show her gratitude in a tangible way. The small house was filled with the warm glow of candles and the soft laughter of Ethan, who had taken to calling Marcus Santa's helper. As they sat around the table, Ethan proudly showed Marcus his favorite toy, a remote-controlled car that still brought endless joy. "It's my favorite, Mr. Marcus," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Thank you for making this the best Christmas ever." Marcus chuckled, his deep laugh filling the room. "I'm just glad you're happy, buddy." Lisa raised her glass, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "I want to make a toast," she said, "to Marcus, for showing us that kindness can change everything. You didn't just give us a Christmas miracle. You gave me a new perspective and a chance to be better. Thank you." Marcus nodded, his expression humble. "Here's to new beginnings," he replied, lifting his glass. As the clock struck midnight, Lisa reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had learned more in a single Christmas than she had in years, about forgiveness, about the power of kindness, and about the courage it took to change. And she knew, without a doubt, that Marcus's actions had set her on a path toward a better future, not just for herself, but for Ethan too. Her voice echoed in her mind as she thought of the words she wanted to carry into the new year. Sometimes, the people we judge the most are the ones who teach us the greatest lessons. Marcus didn't just save Ethan's Christmas. He gave us a second chance at being better, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Lisa's transformation from bitterness and prejudice to gratitude and humility reminds us all of the profound impact kindness can have. Her story isn't just about receiving a Christmas miracle. It's about realizing how compassion can heal the divisions we create in our hearts. Marcus's quiet act of generosity shines a light on the strength of forgiveness and the courage it takes to choose love over judgment. This powerful journey asks us to reflect on our own lives. Have there been moments when someone's kindness changed your perspective for your life? Times when you unfairly judged someone, only to be surprised by their humanity? Let's create a ripple of compassion. Share your experiences in the comments below and inspire others to see the good in the world. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the power of kindness and the strength of the human spirit. Together, we can spread love, forgiveness, and understanding, one story at a time.